Peace and blessings, and welcome back to Religiously Nerdy. This is Ellie here with my co-host Toby and Toyin, and we are live here in the middle of Ramadan, here to talk about a topic that's been sitting on our brains: spirituality and fandoms. So today we'll be talking with a returning guest and our beloved City Ali Hussain about spirituality and fandoms, the good and the bad. So first, to point out something that's obvious that we all should know, but just in case, what is a fandom? So the textbook definition of a fandom is a subculture composed of fans characterized by a feeling of empathy and camaraderie with others who share a common interest. And sometimes with fandoms, they take place of religion and kind of go beyond what a simple fandom would be of just liking something. For example, Star Wars, Disney, and Harry Potter. So, with that being said, got a question. The first question we have for you, City, is what fandoms do you take part in, and which ones are you active in general?
Yeah.
So there is the big ones. So obviously Star Wars, Lord of the Rings, video games, which is a huge subculture, and then you've got like the Batman Arkham subculture, and then you've got wrestling games, you've got action games, you've got Uncharted, The Last of Us, or a company fandom, right? Like Naughty Dog or Square Enix and all of that stuff. Also, of course, Marvel, the Marvel Universe fandom, Harry Potter, the DC Universe. Let's see, what else? X-Files, definitely X-Files. Star Trek, Matrix, not so much. And the funny thing is I've actually was deeply invested in various fandoms as I grew older. Back when I was in middle school, I remember the first real fandom I really became crazy about was Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
So I was in Jordan and Mortal Kombat 1 had come out on the Super Nintendo. So this is a long time ago, right? And I remember I got into a big hoo-ha with my dad because Mortal Kombat, he didn't want me to play it because it had blood.
Yeah.
And my whole thing was you let me play Doom.
Oh gosh. And Doom is so much worse.
Yeah, it's you let me play Doom. What's so bad about Mortal Kombat? So about that,
Mortal is in the name.
Oh man, yeah, exactly. So that can, and actually also much worse in a different way was Duke Nukem 3D. That was that was bad in a different way. But from the Silence and the Critters, I get it that you guys don't know Duke Nukem.
No.
Oh my god.
So I know of the name of Duke Nukem, but I don't know too much about Duke
It was
Nukem.
crazy. It was like, the best way I can say it is it's like Grand Theft Auto in first person shooter form.
Oh
gosh.
all the side frisky things you can do in Grand Theft Auto, you could do in Duke Nukem 3D in first person. And I'll just stop there. Yeah, the Mortal Kombat fandom, I was part of that, and that extended to Street Fighter. And actually, I think it started with Street Fighter, and then it included Mortal Kombat until Mortal Kombat Trilogy. And then I got involved in strategy games, so I was a huge part of Age of Empires, and then that carried me into wrestling games, and then Star Wars and all of that. So, and the ones that I'm active in general, I guess, there are certain things that I like to revisit. So every once in a while, every year, I think, if you guys remember Christopher Lee, who did the role of Saruman, it is
Yes.
Christopher Lee, isn't it? Yeah, he said that he reads he reads the Lord of the Rings once a year. Like he has a khatim once a
Oh,
year.
nice.
May he rest in peace. But yeah, so I make sure to watch the movies once a year.
Oh, cool.
Like and I mean the whole 6, like The
Wow.
Hobbit. I begin with The Hobbit, and then right when I watch the Battle of the Five Armies, and there is that sad ending of it there, I make sure that carries me over into the Lord of the Rings. And then I have to go through the sadness of the end of the Return of the King, the ending of it all. And so that usually help, that non-closure sort of makes me watch all of Star Wars. And when I mean all of Star Wars, I mean episode 1, episode 2, all of the cartoons between episode 2 and 3.
Oh, so intense.
Yeah,
So you're
Clone
like
Wars, the animated movie, Clone Wars, the cartoon, with Elizabeth, with Snoodles and
no, not with the weird one.
and then episode 3, and then Star Wars Rebels, and then I think Han Solo movie and Rogue One, and then episode 4, and so on and so forth.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
But like Star Wars is such a vast. There's so much in there with Star Wars, though.
It's insane. It's insane.
Have you seen like the Star Wars anime yet?
I haven't seen the Star Wars anime.
You should catch that on next. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there is actually another one. There was another one that came, another animated series that came, Resistance, I think it was called. I think it was a short 1 season or something like that. And then, of course, like I try to keep up with the Marvel universe. Like I haven't watched Moon Knight yet, but I have. I've kept up with all the other series.
Nice.
You need to start Moon Knight. It's good.
Very
It's
nice.
good, huh? Yeah.
It's good.
So that's usually my share in the fandom. Wrestling is an interesting fandom for me because I used to watch it religiously. Like Monday nights, there was an era in the 90s, late 90s, called the Monday Night Wars, where there was 2 main promotions, WWF and WCW, and then eventually WWF bought WCW. But Monday nights was like a religious ritual for me. After I come back from high school, I would try and finish my work as quickly as possible, and then I would play wrestling games until 8 o'clock, which is when WCW Nitro came on, and I would watch WCW Nitro until 9, which is when WWF Raw came on. And then from 9 to 11, I would basically switch during commercial breaks between WWF and
That is crazy.
Yeah.
That is
I
Yeah.
remember
wild.
those days. I remember the days where
continued for,
WWE was amazing.
And then, and no sacrilegious, it's WWF. WWE is an abomination. It's not real.
Sorry.
Oh,
No, but then I watched, and I mean, that was like my life until like 2001, I want to say 2002. And then I sort of left it until I want to say 2007. And then I started playing the wrestling games again. But mostly now it's a nostalgia for me. It's a nostalgia trip. I try to keep up with the programming. It's, in my opinion, a disaster. But I just it's a nostalgia thing for me. But that's basically my fandoms.
Cool.
So I'm gonna ask you another question. So how can spirituality be found in fandoms?
Yeah, so that's an important question, right? I mean, I think the important thing about fandoms is that any fandom, it always revolves around a story, right? Even if you look at something that's much more old-fashioned, that's not like necessarily mythology or a movie or a story, like stamp collecting, right? That's a fandom, right? There is a huge stamp collecting culture. And every stamp has a story, right? Like where it comes from, how much it's worth, the people who've carried it before, the people who've collected and how it got here and how it, and so on and so forth. I think that the reason fandoms are important spiritually is because of the story. It's because people, necessarily by our nature, we need a mythology to be invested in, to make sense of our lives. I mean, we all go through difficulties, be they bodily, spiritual, or mental, psychological, or financial. And in all of these cases, a mythology helps us to cope, right? It gives us hope, because once we see a hero overcome tremendous odds, right? And there are very sort of specific ways, and Joseph Campbell wrote about all. I mean, Joseph Campbell is really to be credited with inspiring probably the biggest of fandom, Star Wars, because he was the mentor of George Lucas. It's this, there was a documentary a while back on Disney Channel about the Star Wars con. And there was a story about this father who was religiously going to the Star Wars con since he was like in his early 20s. And then like he had a son, and his son thought his dad was a weirdo, right? Like, my dad going to Star Wars. And then he finally managed to convince him to go with him. And then the big plot twist happened that so the father was a Jedi, was like a completely invested in the light side of the Force. And the big plot twist is that his son decided to become a Sith.
What a twist of events.
And then
Betrayal, if anything.
But then there is this crazy part where the father starts bawling. He starts crying, like looking at his son, basically leaving the light side of the Force and becoming,
Oh my gosh.
part of the dark side. But he's, it's like I'll learn to love you anyways, right? that kind of thing. But I think in all of that, it's and I'm reminded here of Steven Spielberg, right? When I think I've mentioned in a podcast before where he talks about the reason he makes the movies. He says is because I have these fears, like the movie Jaws. That's a fandom. There's a whole subculture for Jaws.
Yep.
And so he says the reason, or E.T., right? He says the reason I make these movies is because I have a deep fear of what lives under the ocean and a deep fascination of what's in space. Says now, when I make these movies, I'm externalizing my fears and fascinations in a mirror in front of me. And then my audience, I feel like we're an army of gladiators. We're going head on to face my fears and I'm no longer afraid. Or we're going head on to explore outer space and I'm no longer, I'm excited. So it's that's the importance of culture. And the fact that Steven Spielberg uses the motif of gladiators is fitting, because this really goes back throughout human history. We've always done this, and we've always had the need to do this. And so culturally, we've always found a way to do it. And sure enough, I mean, obviously, religion is a part of that, right? Fasting subculture is a fandom. Prayer in congregation is a fandom, because it is also based on conviction and faith in a mythology. And by mythology, I in no sense mean something that's superstition, but I mean something that transcends the physical, right? And this is part of the crisis of religions today, is that we have chosen to eliminate the mythological. So then prayer becomes just a physical duty that you have to do 5 times a day. It's not about an ascension, for example, or taking a spiritual journey, or like you don't feel like you're one of those characters in the video games or the movies, and you're going on your quest, you're going on your adventure.
Yeah. Mhm.
But traditionally, that's how it was thought of.
Mhm.
And that's why the stories were always very important in religious communities, because they reinforce the fact that in all the rituals that we do, it is not the physical, but it's what the physical represents.
Mhm.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me think about the movie Journey that we
I was
watched,
just
y'all,
about to mention, yeah.
because of every time there was like a hardship that happened, the one thing that they held on to was the oral recitations of the stories that they were told, that kind of carried on with them. So that kind of held on to, you know, this ritualistic thing of we can do this, or whatever motivation that they needed at the time. And
Right.
it just stays with them the
Yep.
entire time. And I think that's one of the things about Islam, especially because it is, you know, a tradition that is basically oral, like the oral recitations of the
Right.
Quran, and how everything is passed down orally. So like, I think, I don't know, I think it's just so wonderful, especially because when you think of like, especially with Star Wars, because of how big it is, there could be
Right.
people that have never seen the movie Star Wars, but they can just know just from hearing someone else talk about it.
Yeah.
Like yes, even with like just any fandom show in general. Like yesterday we were guests on another podcast, and I had not seen Moon Knight yet, and they were
Mhm.
talking about Moon Knight, and it
Yeah.
was amazing because I got to be a part of this conversation and a part of this fandom for just maybe like 15-20 minutes of just
Right.
them talking about it so passionately about it.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's that, you know, the a whole other part of this, and it's also a spiritual dimension, is the social interaction, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because for many people, like, they do not have the ability for various reasons to just interact with anybody on the street.
Mm.
Or they might have a problem making friendships.
Mhm.
And then they just open up in these fandoms,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, they do.
They just bloom. And you know, this is one of the things that Phil Spencer, the president of Xbox, he wrote a beautiful blog on the social benefits of gaming, where he was talking about, I mean, and that's really, for me, like, that's only 1% of the power of video games today. But he was talking specifically about this idea of, you know, the community and the ability, not just a community, but it's this idea of taking a mythological journey with somebody else and feeling invested with them in this journey that you're taking.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all of that spiritually, at the most spiritual level, the importance it has is it gives us hope. It allows us to cope, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
we know by human nature that every story needs to have a hero, and heroes triumph at the end against all odds. And that I think is very necessary.
Definitely. And I feel like every story, like that's like the basis of any story. Really.
It is
There
the
really
basis of
isn't. There's no. I can't even think of anything that doesn't have that. Like.
Yeah, you need a hero and you need a villain.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You need a villain, right? And we need, and the villain actually needs to be sophisticated and complex.
Yeah.
They should not be simple. They should not be trivialized just because they're evil.
Mm-hmm.
Because the more sophisticated and complex and strong and present evil is, the more meaningful the triumph will be.
Definitely. Yeah.
Against them. Yeah.
Get it. Mm-hmm.
And I think that's, you know, that's like even, you know, the issue of violence, for example. Like, we always, you know, there is this whole thing about violence in video games, which at even a social or cultural level is meaningless, because we have movies can be much more violent.
Mm-hmm.
But the issue is of course, well, in video games, you interact, you play the role of the person who is either inflicting or experiencing the violence. And but the you know, what Miyamoto said, the creator of Mario, which was really powerful, is that, well, but we never talk about movies in the sense of just because there are violent movies, that means we should just do away with the genre altogether.
Of course, yeah.
Right? But beyond that, I think the issue is what purpose does the violence serve in a story? Because even the Quran contains and mentions violence. But it's part of a story. It's part of a purpose, right? It's there for a reason, because human life, our lives contain violence.
Yes, it does.
I mean, we see it outwardly, and many of us, we experience it or inwardly. And so it's like, you know, it's also about how, so there's a lot of like violent video games that have incredible stories. Like, for example, The Last of Us.
Yeah.
The Last of Us is a very violent game, but it's also a game where the violence serves a very specific purpose, and it's done incredibly well. So I think what I'm saying is, in normal circumstances, violence, or let me say it this way, the reason why fandom or a mythology or a story is important also is that it allows us to experience certain aspects of our existence in a harmless way, such as violence, such as evil. It allows us to come face to face with all of that without having to inflict it upon others. Right? It allows us to come to terms. I mean, I oftentimes wonder how many people had inner Palpatines inside of them that, had they not watched that story, might have actually materialized and manifested that physically, and would have been frightened. Right? Because I actually know stories of people who told me, like, the relationship between Luke and his father helped me heal from years of domestic abuse. I mean, that you know, that I've actually
crazy,
had people, I've had people tell me that, or I've read about people for whom, for example, the what's it called, the relationship between Kratos and Atreus in God of War helped heal father-son relationships. So there are real effects. And I guess, you know, this goes into the third question, but it's also a sacred responsibility to tell a story well. In which case, if it's not done well, then it can be harmful. So I guess I'll wait for the third question.
No worries. Yeah. So,
Oh, no,
that
you're totally
question
fine.
it's fine. So yeah, what would you say are good qualities of fandoms, and what would you say are bad?
First, I am completely against judging a story or a fandom by any rules external to the artists who crafted it.
Makes sense.
Like, I am completely against, I mean, you know, I was just thinking about that today because somebody shared a link by a prominent American Muslim scholar talking about music. And and he wasn't necessarily saying that music is forbidden, but he was talking about the, you know, this whole, like, the good and the bad effects of music. And I was like, I am completely, now I'm at the level where if I hear a scholar talk about culture in its entirety,
Without any, like,
I just shut off.
Yeah.
I
Right.
shut up. And even if they praise it, by the way, even if they praise it, even if they tell me you can listen to music, I'm sorry, I don't need your opinion to listen to music. It's a human thing. It's not a religion thing. And this is very important to understand.
Mhm.
Find me a single human civilization throughout history that didn't have music and didn't have stories and didn't have paintings and didn't have architecture, that didn't have statues. Find me a single civilization. You will not be able to find it. It doesn't exist, because these are, even in religion, melody is part of ritual.
Of course. Yep.
So it's like baby steps for me for someone to say, well, I think listening to music is okay, but I think the real growth is to say it's a non-issue. Culture and producing culture, consuming culture is a non-issue. You do not need a religious scholar to tell you that listening to music or watching movies or reading poetry is allowed.
There was actually, I want to say this was at the Star Wars retreat where you actually had mentioned, and I'm going to paraphrase this, but civilizations were built on humanities, not the maths
Not
and
the
sciences.
sciences.
Yep.
Not the
Yep.
sciences.
Of course. Yeah.
And religions are actually part of the humanities. At the core of it,
Yep.
religions is even scripture, it's stories. You can read a scripture as literature, and you're looking at a series of stories and moral imperatives. And so ultimately, it's all the humanities. So you judge. I don't want to hear any scholar tell me about how a movie is bad. I'm interested in hearing directors and producers and actors tell me how. And the funny thing is that religious scholars should know better, because they're the ones who are suffering from the crisis of people talking about religion with no prior knowledge.
Yeah.
They're the ones who are like, you cannot be an imam, you cannot teach religion without having gone to religious school and got an ijaza and went to this school and this school. But they be sitting there talking about culture left and right.
Yeah, they not even
Without actually
part of
being
it.
a part of
Yeah,
culture.
not even
Yeah.
part of it. They're just judging
They haven't. I mean, I giggle inside when I hear someone saying, our young people. This is happening now. They're saying our young people are sitting there playing Super Mario World on a Nintendo. I'm like, what century do you live in? What century? Do you think we still play Pac-Man? I mean, we do, but that's not where video games are right now. Like, that's not
what we're doing.
like, I'm like, you need to catch up. You have some catching up to do, because it's like, stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Really, stay in your lane. So I do not take the word of a religious scholar, no matter how well educated they are. And I'm being very blunt with this. And I know this is going on YouTube on a podcast, and I stand by what I say. I do not take seriously the words of a religious scholar once they start talking about art and culture, unless they are artists.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't care how much you've read about it. Have you gone through the experience of suffering as an artist, going through the creative process, going through producing or editing a movie, going through all of that? Otherwise, stay in your lane. Because you're contributing to the same problem where people are opening the Quran or opening Sahih Bukhari, opening hadith books, and then just speaking left and right, and people are listening to them. And then they're not listening to you, but they're saying the controversial thing, and you're saying the controversial thing, which is movies are haram, music is haram, this is haram, this is haram, this is haram. Or even it's like, I don't need you to tell me that there is good music and bad music.
That's
I
a-
know that.
Yeah.
If you have a
Exactly.
good taste in music, you will know. You will know. It's a human thing. It's not, it's like, can I listen to this song? Can I watch this movie? This movie is this. I'm like, it's a matter of taste.
Mhm.
It's a matter
Yes.
of being human.
And some
And-
people lack that taste.
Yeah. I mean, I was listening to an Egyptian comedian. He passed away, but he was talking about the chemistry that he has with his audience on stage. And he was like, sometimes, he says, the other day I had one audience member in the play whose laugh was so hysterical that he actually energized the whole crowd and the actors on stage.
Mhm.
Like, his laugh was so hysterical that I had to make fun of his laugh in the play so he would stop, because we were just getting too riled up and we couldn't continue the play.
That's good. That happens.
But then he said, some people don't understand comedy. Some people don't even know how to laugh.
Wow.
Some people don't even know how to laugh. And we've lost the taste, especially as a Muslim community in the West. Many of us have lost the ability to taste art. We really have. We can't tell. I mean, my God, when Star Wars The Last Jedi came out, and it was a direct attack against tradition, like Luke had this reaction against the hierarchy and the bureaucracy of the Jedi Order, and how they allowed someone like Palpatine to rise in the Senate and to become the Emperor. And when I was reading comments by Muslim scholars who went
Wow.
and watched the movie, I was blocking people left and right. I was blocking these scholars left and right,
Mhm.
because I just could not fathom the complete ineptitude to watch and analyze a movie deeply.
Mhm.
Like, it's just gone. It's just gone. Because and by the way, these are not Salafi Wahhabi scholars. I don't even care about them.
Mhm.
These are traditional scholars.
Yeah, traditional.
These are traditional scholars.
Mhm.
But because for them religion is reduced to right and wrong, haram and halal, that has become the only way they're able to engage with the world,
Mhm. Mhm.
including movies.
That's not how the world. But that's not how the world works. That's not how.
That's not how the world works.
So
It's not how the
Exactly.
world works at all.
No.
There's
And that's definitely not how stories work.
Mm-mm.
there's I was a part of a conversation, more of like a dialogue of people talking about, and this is, I know we're talking about spirituality and fandoms, but this was kind of talking about mental health.
Yeah.
But about, and we have a podcast topic where we actually talk about mental health and anime, but like, as far as
Mhm.
mental health and religion especially, it it was really weird, because one person was a mental health advocate and going to school for mental health, and another person was an imam, and they were just kind of having this healthy discussion, I'll say, about where the place is. And the imam was like, well, it's not the imam's responsibility to do, lead in mental health. It's the mental health person's responsibility. And the mental health therapist, the psychiatrist, whomever, should also know more about religious practices, especially if they're a Muslim therapist or any kind of mental health practitioner, which is weird take, because you're saying that you want this person to be an Islamic scholar and this, mental health, therapist. And so the rhetoric was, well, why can't you guys do the same thing in that regard?
Like, why not do the opposite?
It's like it's not our responsibility to do that. Like we're responsible for saying this, that, and the other. And of course, the back and forth was happening, but it was like there's such a dense, like
God.
there's a lacking of understanding in how that
Absolutely.
works. Because
Absolutely.
when it comes to culture, especially for Muslims in the West, all we know is pop culture. All
Yep.
our references are pop culture. Like it doesn't matter what side of the spectrum of pop culture you're on, you're in pop culture. It doesn't matter if you're obsessed with TikTok, because most of the time those references come from pop culture, or they're
Right.
just comedy references. Like the fact that some of these Islamic leaders are so out of touch,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
kind of concerning, because like you want to go up to these people and be like, hey, I like this. Because if I say, oh, I have a problem with, so like if a person says, oh, they have a problem with something, or they have an issue, and they're like, oh, what are things are you battling with? And like, oh, well, these are the things that I do. And as soon as they would mention something that's, I guess, worldly or pop
Yeah.
culture related, it's
Yeah. They're
immediately,
like,
well,
well,
why don't
stop
you get
listening to
rid of that?
music and you'll
Just
feel
stop
better.
doing it. Just
Yeah,
stop.
we'll stop doing that, and then alhamdulillah, you'll be fine.
And it's like,
and
and the funny thing is like that's the only outlet that person has.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
you're telling them to destroy whatever sense of joy they have in their life. It's like, you know, I sit down to watch Moon Knight once a week to just feel good about all the crap that I've gone through in the whole week, and now you're telling me to stop doing that. That's your brilliant solution. You know,
Well,
it's like maybe
that kind of leads us into like, what about the positives and the negatives of spirituality?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the positives is that is really the same as what we said about the fandom. I mean, they serve the same purpose, is that to make you feel like you're something larger than the physical, or even that your physical existence is meaningful on a whole nother level. It's not that the physical doesn't matter, and I think this is really key, because the whole purpose of art is not to art culturally is always rooted in color, sound, or word. And so the purpose of art is not to make us completely transcend the physical. It's to allow us to perceive how this physical can be sacred, can be part of something larger. In all our human weakness, we can triumph, we can overcome, we can do some extraordinary things, right? That's the importance of it. The negative of it is that because spirituality pertains to something that is beyond the physical, it is very easy to abuse, right? It is very easy for someone to control, to dominate, to talk about something which they have no knowledge of, because you have no way to disprove them.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
I mean, how
tough.
can you disprove them, right? You can't see it, you
That's
can't
powerful.
touch it, right?
Exactly.
So now, but the question becomes is, how do you distinguish? And my thing is, you distinguish by whether that person that's talking about spirituality, or whether that mechanism that's perpetuating a type of spirituality is genuinely trying to make us exist at a deeper level, right? Make us become better at a deeper level, deepen our aesthetic sensibility, give us purpose, give us meaning in our lives. And in this sense, a story like Star Wars or a video game like The Last of Us can be much more meaningful than how religion is taught today. And it's neither the fault of religion, nor is it particularly a merit about the zombie apocalypse story or science fiction like Star Wars. No, what it's about is the artist. In the case of the art, in the case of the movie, in the case of the video game, the artist who wielded it, it's coming from a true place. It's coming from a genuine place. It's relevant, right? It's relevant. It's real. It's meaningful. It's visceral, meaning it's not sugar-coated. It's very real, right? And similarly, the fault is not with the religion, but it's with the custodians of the religion, those scholars who are teaching it. And they're teaching it at a purely rational level, that it's not meaningful outside the boundaries of the mosque. And for many people, it's not even meaningful within those boundaries. There are so many transgressions and aggressions that take place within the boundaries of the masjid, within the boundaries of the church, within the boundaries of the synagogue. If it's serving that purpose, if it's serving the purpose of making us, of making our path clearer for us, then whatever it is, if it's a story, if it's a myth, if it's a fandom, or it's a religious group, it's serving its purpose. It's good. And it doesn't matter how sacred or holy the text, if it's not being used, if it's not being used to better human lives, it's a disaster. And in many sense, you know, all the main distinction between, say, between a scripture, between the word of God and a creative inspiration that was inspired by God to a human being in the form of a movie or a video game or a poetry, is that the potential of bettering humanity is greater in the direct word of God. And that there should be a line of inspiration connecting the human being, or sorry, connecting the Quran, the word of God, to those other forms of human creative inspiration. That should be there. And so in that sense, you know, if that's the ideal world that we would be living in, but we don't live in that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
You know, we live in a world where, as you mentioned, and as we experience it, the Quran is put on one side. So it's like, you know, why are you wasting your time listening to music? Read more Quran.
Exactly.
Why are you wasting your time watching movies? Read more Quran.
More Quran.
Why are you wasting your time playing video games? Read more Quran. And it's like, you know, then present the Quran as exciting to me, right, as the music and the video games and the movies that I'm engaging with, and I will read it. But you're not doing your work.
I remember hearing someone say, you want to have the Quran recited in a melodious voice, a voice that's pleasing to hear. So my thought process always was, well, don't you want someone that you know can sing to recite the Quran?
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you know, that's the whole, and that's what the Prophet ﷺ did. Yeah, I mean, when one Sahabi had a dream of the adhan, before the adhan was even a thing, and he came and he told the Prophet ﷺ, the Prophet ﷺ told him, go and tell Bilal to do it, because Bilal, and it's kind of a you know, it's a very blunt statement by the Prophet ﷺ. It's like, go and tell Bilal to do it, because his voice is more beautiful than yours. But it is what it is.
It is.
Right? It's about, you know, if someone has a beautiful voice, They have a beautiful voice for a reason. God gave them that,
Yep.
and it's a talent that they have and they need to use.
Mhm.
So now, it's another issue of why, this is the situation. This is how Muslim scholars are. They're inept at dealing with culture. Okay. Now, why is that the case?
Yeah. Mhm.
Now, we should understand that our fandoms that we engage with in the world today, even anime, at a deeper level, they're nourished by the metaphysics and the philosophies of their cultures. So, Lord of the Rings, as written by Tolkien, is actually a very Catholic story.
Yep. Yep. Mhm.
Right? Harry Potter, on the other hand, is more Protestant.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Right?
Well,
Star
I didn't
Wars.
even notice this.
Yeah,
And I'm
right.
just
Star Wars is also very Christian, right? Because you have the immaculate or the immaculate conception, no father for Anakin, and bringing, and also very Buddhist in the idea of the Jedi and the Sith and the dark side and the Force and all of that, very Sufi, yes. And then, Marvel Universe, even the idea of a superhero goes back to Joseph Campbell, in which case he also takes it from mythology and Greek. So
yep.
we're being entertained
Mhm.
by these fandoms, but in reality, we are entertained because they serve a deeper purpose in our lives that
Yep.
is very much mythological.
Yes. Yes.
Now, the problem is that Muslim scholars and the education, everybody in this generation of Muslim scholarship, Islamic scholarship in the Muslim world over the past, I want to say, 200 years, has not engaged with world philosophies and world mythologies at all.
Mm.
So the reason why the normal imam at the masjid does not appreciate God of War, it's because he doesn't even, his religious education does not even contain reading Greek mythology.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't know what the Greek mythology is. He doesn't even know Catholicism. So why would he appreciate Lord of the Rings? He doesn't know about the difference between Catholicism. For him, all Christians are disbelievers. He doesn't even know the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism. So why would he even be able to appreciate Harry Potter? For him, it's just magic, and magic is haram.
Yeah.
That's another thing
Yeah.
too. People say that Harry Potter is like witchcraft.
Exactly.
Don't read it.
It's immediately
exactly.
haram because witches.
Yeah. I'm like, and so it's the same. They don't even understand the idea behind the zombie apocalypse. So why would they be able to appreciate something like The Last of Us or The Walking Dead or any of these fandoms? They definitely don't appreciate Asian cultures and the oral stories and like for example Shinto shrines in Japan. And there's this new video game that came out, Ghostwire Tokyo, that's supposed to be like really
with the hands.
It's supposed to be like really. They paid very close attention because the studio that developed it is like completely Japanese developers, so they paid very close attention to the culture. And it's supposed to be like a sort of like a critique of Ghost of Tsushima and Sifu and stuff like. But
Sifu.
If you don't have appreciation for the cultures and the philosophies and the metaphysics, one, you're not going to appreciate the cultural productions that are born out of those philosophies. And two, more importantly, don't expect anybody to respect your culture or your religion.
Exactly.
Or your
Oof.
spirituality.
That's a word right there, because
Mhm.
sometimes I really be struggling. Like, why do you want me to care? You don't care about any of the things that I like or appreciate. But that can even go down to just bare cultures, period, just like individual cultures within the Muslim community too.
And like in the world in general, like the world is made of diverse things. You're supposed to know each other, not just put a wall like to not even accept or even try to understand someone else's culture. Like that's like going against like everything that someone says.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, they want us, they get happy when Christians, say Ramadan Mubarak or Eid Mubarak to you, but they don't want to say Merry Christmas.
Yeah.
They don't want to say Happy Easter. They don't want to say this. They don't want to say that, because, and I'm like, but, and by the way, there is deeper than even appreciating Catholicism or Greek mythology or Christianity. There is the whole idea of understanding how culture even works that is completely missing from the equation. Like you don't even know what does it mean to live in a pluralistic culture. You don't even know what that means. You don't even know how cultural production works. The fact that so many Muslim scholars still use the term Islamic culture shows me that they don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
Because I'm inclined to ask, what do you mean by Islamic culture?
It's not a monolith. Like, what do you mean?
Exactly. Is it Arab culture because that's where you're from? Or is it
that's what you're sounding like it's from? That's what you're telling me it is.
Right?
You're saying Islamic culture is.
But then the funny thing is, I would wish that they actually were in tune with their own culture.
Exactly.
They're not. I mean, I am very much Arab in my musical taste. I play the oud. I am very much in tune with that. And that actually sustains me and allows me to appreciate American culture and to deal with it in a sophisticated way, because I cherish it like I cherish my heritage. But these people who talk about Islamic culture and they want you to dress like you're in Saudi, they don't even like Saudi culture. They don't even care about Saudi culture. Homeboy was born in Pakistan. He's trying to be Saudi and he wants you to be Saudi as well. I mean, that's what it is. But that's exactly what it is. There is no understanding of how culture works. And so it's sad because in our faith, we have all the pieces to understand how it's supposed to work. We know that the Prophet ﷺ, even though he was Arab, he wore clothes from all over. He wore Ethiopian robes, he wore Persian robes, he wore everything. If he was given a gift, he took it and he appreciated it because he understood he was universal.
Yep. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that's the situation, unfortunately.
So with all of that though, how can the fandoms especially be intertwined with spirituality? Because of how spread out and how open and diverse spirituality can be and how fandoms can be, how can we intertwine both of those things and kind of include them in our communities as well? Yeah, so I think the key is to have, there is, if we consider fandom as art culture, then, and it is, right? I mean, it is. You have art, and then you have art about art. And we need that genre of art about art. So we need bloggers and, video gamers, video game makers, movie producers who make
who do not produce an art like an original story, but they write and they make art about this connection between art and spirituality. So for example, Journey, the video game, is a perfect example of this intersection between fandom and spirituality. It's really a story not about just video games. It's really a spiritual intersection, right? It's religion or spirituality, the highest level, told in art form. Told in a story, yes, but it's art about art. It's like, it's a statement that this is what video games can do spiritually. This is the possible effect of video games spiritually.
Yeah.
These are the possibilities. In terms of movies, like when I was in high school, we watched a documentary that was probably a documentary that affected me so much. It was called Looking for Richard. It's a documentary by Al Pacino. And I've never watched another documentary like that. It's Al Pacino and a group of actors and actresses, American actors and actresses, rehearsing and studying on how to act Shakespeare. So the story of the documentary is that Al Pacino is playing the role of Richard III from the play Richard III of Shakespeare. And the whole documentary is about all these American actors going to meet British actors, asking them, how should American actors act Shakespeare? And they're rehearsing for the play. The funny thing is, the play never happened. It's just a documentary about studying for how to perform. Right? That's what I'm talking about. So we need, like, for example, we have, now we have Netflix documentaries like Abstract, Art of Design. We need so much more of that. We need art about art. So Abstract is a series of interviews with artists in different genres, and they're all talking about their creative process.
I see. Nice.
So that's what we need, because we need to understand how where spirituality and fandoms overlap. Right? So I would imagine, on a practical level, we need a documentary like the one I mentioned about the Star Wars con, but we need a documentary where people go to cons and they just ask people about, their spirituality. Like, how does this, how does this culture affect you spiritually? What does it mean to you spiritually? Why is this important to you? Is it, I hardly imagine that everybody will say, well, I'm just here passing time. I mean, you come here every year and you go through a lot of time putting on your outfit, your costume, and your makeup, and all of that. There's something else that's operating here. So I think in all of that, that's what that's the way to go. Art about art. Because as I teach in my retreats, is that the mystical experience that Muslim and Christian saints have is really no different than the creative process, than creative inspiration. So there is a lot of work that we need to do as a society in trying to see how similar, what these artists are going through. And ultimately will be to say that, what artists go through to produce, to give us the works that we have, is a sacred process. It's not just entertainment. It's a sacred process. And similarly, what saints and what faith should be like, it should be a creative thing. It should be a creative process as well. If that happens, then we are in good place, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. There's a lot of good things that you like wonderful insights that you managed to mention. Like I've been writing stuff down kind of on the side and trying to catch things as you've been mentioning them. But like the one that stood out to me the most is like art is rooted in color, sound, or word. I don't know why that one, because it's kind of hit it because it's like a realization that art is in all three of those forms.
Yeah.
And sometimes all three of those forms come
even
together.
Yeah.
In all the senses as well.
Yeah, I mean, even if you take something like film, it's all three of them, right? If you and not just that it has them, but that there is color palettes and color choices and words and sounds, and certain sounds inspire certain colors, and certain words have certain sounds and certain colors, and so on and so forth.
That's awesome.
I mean, even Goethe, like he said something like, he said architecture is just music frozen in space. Right? And I like to think of poetry as music frozen in time, because music, if you cut it up into pieces, you get speech, you get human speech. That's all it is. We have intonations, we have vibrations in the way we speak. So of course it's all related. I mean, it's all related. But and it's very spiritual, because if you believe in God, that's all this universe that God has created is just a bunch of colors, sounds, and words.
Yeah.
So, and he intentionally made it beautiful. He intentionally made it harmonious, like music, and he made it colorful, like a painting, and he made it expressive, like poetry. So it's only natural that we would be inclined towards art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's literally in our human nature.
Yeah.
Yep. It's inherent.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, that was the right way to
go. That's a nice way for us to end. Good
yes,
golly.
It is.
Oh my
Thank you again for coming on our podcast. It's been so long since we've had you on.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my God.
Thank you for talking about this topic, because this topic has been kind of in the back burner of my mind, but I had no idea how to put the questions into words. So I was thankful for Toby and Toyin for our little power work session to get these questions out.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
If you have anything to share, like social media or anything that's coming up that you're doing, any like future retreats or anything like that planned, feel free to share.
Yes. So actually, we have an upcoming retreat that's gonna it hasn't been announced yet, but there will be a retreat that's taking place probably around Maryland, Virginia in mid to late May, and it will be a poetry retreat. And this has now been shared. I am sort of really excited. By the time this is posted, it will actually be public, because I'm going to share it right now, right after I'm done with this podcast. But I haven't. For those of you, probably many of you know Professor Bilal Ware.
Yes.
Yes. So we are very old friends.
Oh.
And he's actually. He was one of my advisors on my dissertation committee back when he was at the University of Michigan. So we spent long hours at the Jamaican jerk pit in downtown Ann Arbor, eating jerk chicken pasta and coconut cream cake and talking about spirituality.
Oh, nice.
That sounds like a dream.
I haven't seen him since he moved to Santa Barbara. So and we've been trying to make something work. So right after Eid, around May 6th to the 8th, I'll be heading over to California, and we're going to be having a little lecture / talk, me and him, on Jesus and spirituality and creativity. So that's really exciting.
Ooh, nice. We're looking forward to that.
Yes. So that will most probably be live streamed, recorded, and all of that.
Nice. All right.
And folks can check the Instagram, my Instagram and Facebook. They'll see the poster and the details on that, inshallah.
Awesome.
And what is your Instagram?
Ali_Z_Hussain.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we'll be sure to put that all in the podcast.
Yep.
All right. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And please let me know when it's posted and everything. So
yes.
Of course.
Definitely. And definitely share it. Like you can share it on your page and stuff. And yeah, of course. So
absolutely.
Awesome.
Looking forward to it. All right. Jazakumullah khair. Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Assalamualaikum.